You are listening to the Power of Why podcast.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Power of Why podcast. My name is Naomi Haile, and today I am sitting down with Kevin Bourne. Kevin, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
How does it feel to be on the other end of the interview?
It's weird.
On
It's
the other side?
odd. Yeah, it's not often I'm on this side of the interview, but yeah, it's nice. I could definitely do more of these.
Yeah, you have a phenomenal story. For the audience, I want to give you a little bit of context around Kevin and what he's been up to and his past, and then we'll dive right in. So, Kevin is a Toronto based arts and culture journalist, on air personality, as well as a branding and marketing strategist. He is currently the CEO of Shifter Entertainment, which is a film, TV, digital content, and live experiences company. His clients are companies like New Balance, Paramount, Global, and CBC. And through Shifter, Kevin has covered some of Canada's top red carpet events, from the Toronto International Film Festival to the Canadian Screen Awards. And he's interviewed some pretty awesome public figures like Kevin Hart and Ava DuVernay. In a former life, he was a political staffer and TV broadcasting professor in Ottawa, and is now a staple in Canada's cultural landscape as both a commentator and a freelancer, writing and commenting on music, film, and television. He was named a Golden Globe Awards voter and Rotten Tomatoes Tomato Meter approved critic in 2023. And today, Kevin is focused on championing Black entertainment and culture alongside his wife and business partner, Kalia. And so, Kevin, I know that probably only covers like 10% of what you do, because you have a very storied journey and career. I'd love for you to start by sharing a little bit about your origin story. You're the child of two Caribbean parents. You grew up acting, I learned. What was that experience like, and what did you love doing as a
Yeah, so I grew up in North York, in Toronto. My parents immigrated to Canada from Barbados in 1975. So that's something that's a big part of who I am. Just being someone who is of Barbadian heritage, that has really always influenced me as a person. And yeah, my parents, they put me in acting when I was a child. To be honest, I didn't even know why. And it was only this year where my mom actually told me why she did. And she was really just like, in case it was something that I decided I wanted to do one day, and just kind of like, have that as an option. And I was like, it's very odd because, for Black Caribbean parents, like putting your child into like acting and all that kind of stuff is not, it's kind of strange because usually they focus on education and all that kind of stuff. So to focus on, to have your child in like go into acting was just, they had me in piano lessons. They put me in a lot of different creative things as a child. It did a lot for me, just playing piano and saxophone and singing in choirs and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, my life was just very, very creative. From a young age, I knew I loved telling stories. From elementary school, I loved telling stories, loved writing, loved grammar. I was obsessed with it makes sense now.
Grammar?
Yeah, like I would love
I love that.
spelling bees. Like I was like destroying the spelling bees. Like if I lost a spelling bee, I would like almost cry. Like I was, but I always loved words. I always loved just even like I picked up French pretty quickly. My parents put me in French immersion. I was like a part of the first year ever of French immersion in Ontario. As soon as it was available, my parents put me in. And again, I had a thing for language and words. Like I picked up French very, very quickly. So yeah, that's kind of always like, creative child who loved words and storytelling and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, then my parents moved us to Mississauga for a better life. Like, so that's kind of where, I grew up between North York and Mississauga. And yeah, just a nice little family. The youngest, I have an older sister, so I'm the youngest in my family. And
Very cool. Right now, you're kind of getting back into acting. And when you told me that you grew up and your parents put you and your sister, like you would do commercials and you would do auditions, like being pulled from school to be a part of these activities, I'm like, that's a really cool thread and something from your early years that is coming back now as you get back into like entertainment and producing and doing all those things. So it's fascinating to hear that.
it is like it's one of those things where you look back and you're like, okay, I feel like I've been like, whether you believe in God or the universe, whatever. It's like it's like you were being prepared for this path. I believe that most people can look back at their childhood and see in seed form at least a little bit of what what you would become. Like I think a child, like it's like a, you're not the tree yet, but you're a seed, and I think you can see there's evidence of what you'll become when you kind of look back at your childhood and stuff. So definitely having to miss school to go to auditions and being on sets and all that kind of stuff to now being on my own sets and I'm casting people, and it's kind of like wow, like it really is such a full kind of like a full circle moment in life.
Yeah, especially when your parents nurture that. I don't know what your mom saw, but she saw something and was like, hey, this would be a really good space for you to play.
No, definitely. And I think it's like parents don't always do that. They don't always nurture you in whatever it is. It's not like I don't know if I even showed signs of it because I was a shy child. It's not like I was like this rambunctious and extroverted child that was that was like, I was pretty shy and quiet. So it's not like I'm kind of like, what did you see? Because I didn't show evidence of being this like actor.
That wanted to be on the screen. Yeah. And so when you were at York University, you studied political science. Shortly after, you moved to Ottawa and you entered the world of politics as a political staffer on the Hill. What shifted for you during that period? And like, what did you notice about the media scene, the landscape there, and what came next?
The first big shift was just in me personally because I went to Ottawa being shy. So going to a city where it's like you don't know anybody, it really forced me to come out of my shell and network and talk to people and get to know people. Like I had no safety blanket. I had no there was no group of friends I can go back to and just kind of retreat to and stuff. It's like I literally had to like rebuild everything from the ground up when it comes to just relationships and all that kind of stuff. So first of all, it shifted me as a person. Like it made me into a different person because I just had to. I couldn't afford to be shy, So I kind of just got. I feel like I just got kind of kicked in the pool and had to learn how to swim. But also with the political thing, it was interesting because like Parliament is such a historical place. Like the Sir John A. Macdonalds and all these people have walked those halls, So you're walking halls that like great men and women have walked, and you feel that sense of history. You feel that sense of responsibility. So it was. It definitely made me gave me a thought on the rest of Canada because coming from Toronto, yes, we do think that we're the center of the universe. It is true, and so I went to Ottawa not really caring about the rest of Canada, to be quite honest. And just over the course of being in Ottawa and working in Parliament, it just gave me such a love and an awareness about the rest of Canada and just and a love for Canada. Like I met people from like in Toronto, you meet people from like all over the world, whereas in Ottawa, you meet people from across Canada. So my friends were from Saskatchewan, my friends were from Newfoundland, and from all these places, and I'm learning their culture that is a part of Canada, but that I never knew even existed. That sense of just the national scope and like that definitely shifted for me, but also just responsibility wise, like being on the Hill is interesting because like one email sent the wrong way, like worded incorrectly, could have ramifications. Like you're dealing with like there's times where I'm dealing with the Prime Minister's office, I'm dealing with the press, I'm dealing with this, and it's like man, like if this email's not worded properly, like it could mean the wrong thing, and someone could take it and spin it. So there's many times where I'll be sending an email, I'm just like sitting there like okay, about to press send, and I'm like oh my gosh, like you feel that sense of responsibility of like this email matters, this thing I'm sending out matters, which does translate to business too. Like like you have to make sure that you represent yourself well and whatnot. But that sense of responsibility was just like I had never had that before. So it was just like okay, wow, like this is a lot to carry. It's one thing to sit in the classroom and learn about political science, but then when you're actually like I realized afterwards, like being in the classroom didn't necessarily fully prepare me for being in that political environment. So being there was just like, I mean, I loved it. It was one of my best jobs, but it was intense. Like I once I left, I had to detox and not not go anywhere near politics. I still haven't since then, but it was a lot to deal with. But it was still probably the most rewarding job I've done.
Wow. Yeah, and that attention and every word has a meaning, every word carries a meaning, every word matters. It translates to your world in PR and doing comms advising and, working more on the entertainment side of things. And so I don't know if it was called Shifter at the time, Shifter Magazine, but while you were a political staffer, is that when you started kind of entering and meeting artists and meeting people in music? Like, how did that all come to play?
It happened. I mean, when I first moved to Ottawa, one of the first things I noticed was that there was no real media on the scale of what I'd experienced in Toronto. So I was just like, man, where's the media? Like, in my eyes, even though Ottawa, a lot of people consider it like a small town, like, I'm like, hey, this is the capital city. Like, this should be a big city. Like, where's the media that is like exciting and kind of flashy and stuff like that? So yeah, I kept talking to people like, yo, where's the media? But no one cared. And so I was like, you know what? Like, I think I'm supposed to do something about this. And so me and a friend
Can we
eventually.
pause for a second?
Yeah.
Kevin, when you were in Toronto, I guess you're comparing it to what you experienced in Toronto.
Mhm.
For some context, can you share like what your life was like in Toronto when you were in university? Like, what are you comparing the blank the blankness of Ottawa to?
Just being a consumer in Toronto. It's not even like I was doing like I started doing a few things here and there with artists, but it wasn't too like crazy. But just the culture of Toronto, like it's like when you're born and raised in a big city, you don't realize that there's a certain energy that you approach life with that is not the same as when you go to a smaller market. So it's like, yeah, and I mean, in Toronto, it's like, I was actually kind of corporate in Toronto. Like, I really didn't do anything creative until I got to Ottawa, to be honest. Like, I was very boring, suit and tie, organizational development consultant. I was a full-time entrepreneur. And, I spent a lot of time in church. My life was just very, like, but again, having been born in Toronto and raised, it's just like, there's a certain hustle and there's a pace to life that you learn to approach life with, and a sense of ambition too. Like there's an ambition of like, oh, I want to and so when I went to Ottawa, like there wasn't that ambition, that entrepreneurial energy. I literally remember the first day we drove into Ottawa and went to like McDonald's to get food, and we're like, they were so slow, and I was like, what the heck? Like this is not fast food. Like the pace of even the fast food restaurants was just like, oh, I'm just gonna go in and I'm just like, bro, like come on, like get me my food, So the pace in general was just, and the ambition wasn't what I was used to. And then again, just being a consumer of like the Much Musics and all those kinds of things. Like I was always inspired by like Moses Neimer, who founded City TV and Much Music. He's someone that I really like patterned a lot of the stuff I did off of. So I think just being a consumer of media, but also just the energy of Toronto was just very different than Ottawa. It was like now Ottawa is growing into a big city, but back then it was like, oh my gosh, like I could have been in Timbuktu. It was just very slow and all that. So that's the main difference. Not to crap on Ottawa, because Ottawa's a great place, but that's kind of the difference I noticed.
Yeah, that was a bit of another pathway, but you were kind of talking about how Shifter came to be and the spaces that you found yourself in Ottawa. Like, how did that happen? Very organically, or did you said I have to do something about this, and what did you do?
First, I started doing camera operating at Rogers TV, so I was in the sports division. Once I kind of saw that the media was lacking, I was like, okay, let me start to just put my foot in here. So I went to Rogers TV, started doing camera there, and it's after that I met a friend in Ottawa who's originally from Montreal. And it's like, yo, you should start an online magazine that covers this, and I was just like, usually when people give me ideas, I'm like, whatever. But it just really resonated with me. I was like, I feel like I'm supposed to do this. And then maybe like 6 months later, one of the pastors of my church was like, hey, I have an idea for this magazine thing, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, this is the second time I heard this. Yeah. Like, this is, like I need to act on this. And so when we first started it had kind of like a faith and culture component. Like it was more like faith and culture, whatever. But after a while, this report came out on like what the Ottawa music scene needed at that time, and it needed everything that we were doing, but we were kind of doing it more like towards a faith bend. And we were like, okay, do we keep just focusing on here, or do we just kind of serve the city and what it needs right now? And so we decided, you know what, like let's just drop the faith component and let's just go into like we cover culture and music, all that kind of stuff. And as soon as we made that decision, it was just like we started covering our first few events, and people were like, oh my gosh, who are you guys? Where have you been? It was like immediately Ottawa was like, oh, we need this. Yeah, it was just like, it was like an immediate, once we made that switch to be like, we're going to serve Ottawa. Before we kind of buckled down on serving Ottawa, like we already had an audience in like LA, New York, Toronto, London. Like when we looked at our numbers, and Ottawa was further down the list. But we were like, you know what, if we're here, we gotta like let Ottawa know we're here instead of just being this thing that's just like serving all these places. Like let's serve Ottawa for a while, and then we'll go back to doing the stuff like the broader culture stuff and aim towards these bigger markets. And our thing was just like, you know what, we're gonna bring a high level of service. Like we were really serving in our hearts, like service oriented, because we all came from church, and we're used to like serving our butts off in church and stuff like that, and even producing a certain level of quality just being in church. Like that was actually a really good incubator. Sometimes the best talent, the most talented people, whether they're singers or media people, so musicians, they come from church. So like we said, you know what, all that level of service that we were giving over here, let's bring that to just serving all these events in the city and all that kind of stuff. So we just went crazy interviewing artists and trying to be present at like every single event. Our thing was like we're like city TV. We're gonna be everywhere, And that was the goal, was just to be everywhere in Ottawa and just kind of like give people the platform that we felt they deserve. Because my heart was always to like create stars. I had this fixation was like I want to like create stars and treat these people, even if they're in Ottawa, whatever. But like my thing was like I'm gonna treat these people like they're stars. If you're interviewed by us, I want you to feel like I'm somebody, like I'm a star. And that's what we tried to bring to Ottawa. Like I don't think anyone had that focus of like, hey, like I want to at least make local stars, and provide people with a reputable platform. They can say, hey, you know what, so and so, New York has Billboard, so and so city has that, like Ottawa has Shifter. Like that's what I kind of wanted to be. I want it to be so synonymous with like, yeah, like we're Ottawa's thing. So that was kind of the goal.
Yeah, that's great context because it like your decision to position Shifter to align with what the city needed based on what you read in that report is really strategic. And it also, you did that so many times after. And so what were the signs that you saw in the ecosystem? So you would go to these events. I'm assuming it was you and some of your other friends and peers from church. Did I understand that correctly?
Well, after a while, it really became like it was mostly me. And then eventually we brought on Vladimir Jean-Gilles, who's still with us today after like almost 10 years. But we brought him on, and it was either me or just me and Vlad who would go crazy all over Ottawa just covering stuff. One year, my wife ended up buying me a camera for Christmas, and she paid for me to get to take photography lessons. And once I learned how to take pictures, I was like, it's over. I'm at everything. I'm at every event. I'm at every show, just taking pictures and writing articles. And that was the thing. Like with the good thing about Parliament Hill is it taught me how to write, so that which translated to the journalism. So I always knew I was a good writer, but being in communications kind of was the segue into journalism. So yeah, once I knew how to take pictures and write, I was like, I'm just gonna cover everything and go crazy and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's great. Kudos to your wife for getting you that camera and you using it, right? You'd said something really subtle of when you had two people mention like, you should start this thing. The second
Yeah.
time you're like, oh, okay, like I need to act on it. And during our last call, you said something that really resonated with me, which is if you're not faithful to your ideas, they will leave you for someone else. You have to honor and respect the idea like it's a relationship. Can you talk a little bit more about this and any other stories that you have where you have an idea, maybe it's come up more than once, you're someone to act and like immediately start jotting down ideas. So what's your process?
Yeah, like I genuinely have a fear of like not just someone else taking an idea or whatever the case may be. I know human nature, and I know that if you don't act on something right away, you're gonna lose motivation. So I'm the kind of person like as soon as I get an idea, I'm at my laptop starting a document. Like my wife laughs at me because the document king. Like like I love documents. And so anytime I get an idea, my first thing is like, oh, I gotta make a document. Just as a way to activate the idea and just to kind of like start the momentum. Because I just feel like if I don't act on an idea right away, eventually you're just gonna be like, you're not gonna feel the
It's past.
motivation. It's past, right? So it's like you have moments, like there's moments where you feel the passion, you feel the spark, and it's like my thing is like when you feel that spark, you have to right away act on it, move on it, do something to activate that idea. Like it has to be something just to at least get the ball rolling. So I have a fear that like if I don't act on an idea right away, like it's gonna leave, or I'm not gonna have the motivation. So for me, it's just like I I consider myself a doer. I have multiple people in the past who tell me, "You're such a manifester. Like you're a manifester," and I'm like, "No, I'm just a doer." Like that's my main way of I guess there's aspects of manifesting that is outside of your human effort, but I think the main way of manifesting your ideas and stuff is just to be a doer. It's just like, hey, I have an idea, I'm going to do something about it. Like if I say I'm going to do something, I'm gonna do it. Like I'm not the kind of person where I say, "Oh, I'm gonna do that," and I don't do it. Like if I say I'm acting on this, I'm acting on it. So that's just kind of like the person I've always been, and I always create documents. Every show idea I have, if I get an idea for a show, a document's being made. If I get an idea for anything, a document's being made. Or if I get an idea, I'm doing a SWOT analysis document. Like I'm always, I have SWOT analysis like documents in my Google because I'm just like, again, if I get an idea, I have to create some kind of motion towards that, or else, yeah, the idea, could leave me for someone else, or I could just become demotivated. And I never want to be known like there's so many people out there who are talkers. All they do is talk and they don't ever do anything, and those people bother me. And so for me, I never want to be a person that has a reputation as like, oh, Kevin always talks. I want to have the reputation of like, okay, when Kevin says, when Kevin gets things done, if Kevin says he's doing something, he's going to do it, or if I enter a project, right now we have certain TV projects that people have brought to us, and it's like when I enter the project, that project is moving forward. Like it's like we're going from 0 to 100. So for me, it's like I want to know, like when I put my effort towards something, it's gonna move, it's gonna get done, and that's it. I don't know if there's necessarily a strategy to it, but it's just like having that sense within yourself that it's like I want to get things done.
I'd love for you to share examples because you've explored many facets of the creative world. You've mentioned writing. You just touched on producing, directing, acting. You also had a daily hip hop morning show for a stint, and you co-curated a 40-year hip hop exhibit with Ottawa Art Gallery, which are all things that you, I believe, pitched or presented because you were trying to figure out ways that you could collaborate with more people in the city. And so you've done a lot. I'm curious to know, when you have so many hats, how do you clarify with other individuals in the ecosystem to understand exactly when they have an idea for something, okay, I need to go to Kevin specifically for this? How do you manage wearing multiple hats with having a distinct brand?
That's still work in progress for me because I feel like you're always growing and always evolving. Like there's been times over my life where I've had a clear brand, but then you start to pivot and you're like, oh, I'm in the middle of a pivot. When you're in the middle of the pivot, that's when you might lose some people when it comes to, okay, who's this guy? What is he doing? It's like right now I'm in the middle of the TV and film pivot. Right. So it's like when I was just doing Shifter Agency and Shifter Magazine, people knew, okay, yeah, Kevin's a journalist. He also does like stuff for clients on the side. Now it's like, oh, he's the TV and film guy. So it's like, again, when you're in the middle of that pivot is when some people are going to be like, oh, what's he doing? Like, but I've had to pivot so many times. Like when I first, again, when I was in Toronto, I was just very corporate, suit and tie, organizational development consultant. When I got to Ottawa, I was like the guy with the camera all the time. To the point whenever I'd come back to Toronto to cover stuff, to be like, you're the guy with the camera, like you're corporate Kevin. But so it's like I lost some people who are like, oh shoot, like you're not corporate Kevin anymore. And then like there's always been these times where it's like I'm pivoting. Then
you're like reinventing yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like I feel like,
do you see it as a reinvention, or do you see it as you evolving as a natural human being who has curiosities? And
I think that's it though. I think it's just it's an aspect of being human that you're going to explore different things, you're going to evolve and whatnot. Like I know there's gonna come a time where journalist Kevin's gonna die. It's like there's going to become that time where it's like I'm not gonna be that anymore. Right now it's like, yeah, I need to be. But it's like you're constantly evolving, and I think in this particular time of my life, I've actually given up on having a clear, distinct brand in this moment because I recognize that I'm in the middle of a transition. I'm in the middle of a pivot, and I need to educate people. I'm always posting like, hey, I'm at this film and TV event. I'm at this because I'm trying to train people to be like, oh, Kevin's a film and TV producer, because it's like if people don't know, how are you going to attract opportunities in the new thing? Right, you're going to keep attracting old opportunities because people still know, okay, yeah, he's just agency Kevin or he's a journalist Kevin. So I'll attract opportunities in that. But it's like if I don't train people in the new version of myself, how am I going to attract the new opportunity? It's like messaging and saying, hey,
Yeah.
this is the new pivot. This is who I am right now. This is what I'm doing. And because a lot of people they on social media, they're like, hey, don't tell people what you're doing, move in silence, all that kind of BS. On, and I don't ascribe to that. Like, I don't ascribe to like, hey, don't tell people what you're doing. Like, obviously, I don't tell people everything, but it's like I love inviting people into my process, into my pivot, because you're bringing them with you and educating them, and again, hopefully attracting some new opportunities in the new thing that you're doing. So yeah, right now I'm just kind of like I'm still figuring out. At the end of the day, I just all I know about myself is I'm a storyteller, and that is the common thread from when I back in grade three when Madame Doherty in my French class read my story in front of the class and said, "Oh, I love Kevin's story." The common thread from then to my spelling bee, being anal about spelling bees, all the way through to like loving essay questions in high school and exams, all the way through to like Parliament Hill and crafting speeches. The common thread is just storytelling. The art exhibit was storytelling. The radio show was storytelling. Every speech I wrote was storytelling. So I just realized, you know what? It's at the end of the day. I think if I were to summarize, you're giving me some therapy here on your podcast. But but if I were to like summarize myself, it's like I'm just a storyteller that explores. I like to explore different mediums
Mediums.
of storytelling. And that's what for me, I loved the art exhibit because I was just like, afterwards, I was like, oh my gosh, I just told the story. Like, I've told the story of Ottawa hip hop through articles before. I've done like a mini doc series with CBC before, but the exhibit was just like, oh, I told a story again, but this was just me telling it through actual artifacts and visual
Pictures.
elements and pictures and stuff. So at the end of the day, I think I'm just a storyteller who just explores storytelling in different mediums.
That was a bar. I asked you that question because I knew it was going to lead to something really good.
Like it's like
Um,
I had an aha moment just right here on your show.
yeah. And I think for you said so many good things, just even around like building in public and training people with messaging. And that's just branding at the end of the day, right? Like training people how to associate certain opportunities or themes with the work that you do. And I think some people, like during those transitions, they go quiet because it's like they haven't figured it out. They think they need to have it figured it out in order to share it.
Mm.
Where I think it's more powerful just from a connection standpoint to be like, oh, Kevin is figuring it out too. Like I am as well. And there's almost a relief that exists there of bringing people along the journey.
And that's what something that I recognize with social media is like I'm bringing people on the journey and you're building community. So it's like you don't have to have it figured out. Like you're bringing people along the journey and one day they'll be able to say, "Oh man, I remember when Kevin like produced his first show. I remember when Kevin was just going to what at networking sessions, when Kevin was just and now he's here." Like, and I've had a lot of people say they're like, "Man, like," because people have saw me when I was again, I was the guy in Ottawa. I was in everybody's recording sessions. I was at every recording, like a lot of different recording studios, just sitting with artists and being in the recording sessions. Like, I tried to be so present in Ottawa, and now I'm the guy who's like going to Hollywood and being in the same events as like Tracy Ellis Ross and J Lo and all these different things. And it's like I want those people that were with me in the studio in Ottawa. I want them to be able to say, "Yo, Kevin used to be with us in the studio. Now he's in Hollywood. If he could do it," and people have told me that, like, "Yo, if you did it from where you started, like, I know I can do it." And that's for me what I want people to get when they watch what I do. I want them to feel like, man, I can do, because I believe I can do anything. And I'm showing people like our internal motto at Shifter Entertainment is like everything is possible. And I try to live everything is possible. So for me, it's like I want to display that so that people in their own lives could be like, man, yeah, everything's possible. Kevin was here and now he's there. So if he could do it, I can do it.
It's brilliant. I love that for you. And you're also, like you just mentioned, you've had some aha moments right now. Like, I think for me too, I think I'm a little bit nervous about it not looking all the way together online. And I've learned over time that that's something that I need to release to grow and evolve and like really bring people in. And I noticed when I do that, I receive a lot of messages from people, like just like really great messages of it resonating with people. And I'm like, yeah, because I was honest. And I think like at the heart of storytelling is the truth. Like even with acting, so much of the most brilliant actors that you see on stage is because they're being private in public, and that is a form of like resonance with an audience. So
Yeah, and I think people need to realize too, it's like we're building for the medium term. I always have my mind on the medium to long term. So for me, it's like I don't mind if right now things don't look the ideal because I'm like I'm not here for the moment. I'm trying to be here like in the next 20 years. I'm still going to be here, right? So it's like who's going to remember the awkward, like it's like you're in puberty. It's like you're not a child, but you're not an adult. Like you're in that awkward stage where you don't look great. And you're not like we're afraid of that in between period, that puberty stage as we're developing, where it's like things don't look great, but it's like no, like you're in between. You're in transition. It's like if I'm going to be here in the next 10, 20, 30 years, which is what I'm aiming for. Like, I want to still be here in 20 years. Actually, I'll be old by then, but still, I'm trying to be like relevant for that long. When I look at the people like the Cardinal Fischels, the Julie Blacks, the Jay-Z's, the Nas's, who've been at this for 25, 30 years, like I've only been doing Shifter for 11 years. These people have been out there for like 20 something, 25, 30 years. I'm aiming for that. So it's like, I don't mind not having it all together for a moment on social media because it's like I'm building for the medium to long term. I'm here to stay. So this particular moment where I might lose followers or people might be confused by what I'm doing or people might like I don't care with the moment because the medium to long term is where I'm thinking like I'm here to stay. So
when you said the word like in between moments, the thing that came up for me is that's still your life. That's not some like hidden piece along a timeline. That's your life. As much as the high moments and the low moments, like those in between moments are still your life. And like the same respect that you show towards those ideas, you should show and honor your life moments and those periods too. Yeah. Thank you for that. You've discussed your transition from Ottawa to Toronto and seeking out different rooms that you wanted to be in. It was really fascinating for me when the first time that we talked about it. What is the importance, at least for now, can you talk a little bit about what you're doing today and what those new rooms that you're looking to be in look like? And what have you been doing to position yourself in the film and entertainment space?
yeah, so since moving back to Toronto, I've been getting a lot more to like the film and TV stuff. So again, that's where Shifter Entertainment comes in. We started it when we were back in Toronto, but yeah, it's just film, TV, digital content, live experience. It's kind of like we really wanted to create like an entity that kind of encapsulated all the stuff we were doing, like the art gallery stuff and all these different things. We're like, okay, you know what? Those things don't fit within a magazine. Yes, the agency is there, but we were like, you know what? We need something that really encompasses like everything that we're doing. So that's when we kind of like went into the whole thing with Shifter Entertainment. I think I mentioned this first time, but my last few months or last while in Ottawa, it's like I remember being in events where I was just like, it doesn't sound weird about it, but it's like, I remember being in events where it's like I was the most influential person in the room. And I was just like, like I was people's network up, like, oh, I got to talk to him because, but it's like I had no network up in the room or even like a network across because I'd maximized, like I'd fully networked across, I'd networked up. So I was in the room like, man, like there's no one here. And so I knew that I needed to get into rooms where it's like I needed to be the least influential person in the room in order to grow, in order to take myself to the next level. Because some people were like, yo, why did you leave Ottawa? Like, you're like the king. Like, I was a college professor. I did a TED Talk. I was in with the black crowd, the tech crowd, the City Hall crowd, the Parliament Hill crowd. I was like so networked for a guy that used to be shy. But I just, again, being in these, I know I needed to be in rooms where it's like, man, like I don't know anybody and everybody is like more, so even just the other day, like I was with a client at like this entrepreneurial growth camp. It was like for the fastest growing companies in Canada. So my client was on that list. And so she brought me, I was, gathering content for her. And I'm in these rooms with like the fastest growing companies in Canada. And the conversations that these people are having, I'm just like, what are you talking about? Like the level they're going to AI and all these different things. And I was just like, bro, these people are having conversations that the average business owner, especially black business owner, are not having, that we need to be in those rooms. So just being there and hearing these conversations, it's like, oh my gosh, like to be able to conversate and talk at that level of business where you're dealing with millions of dollars just takes like a level of just understanding and decision making that I don't even have yet. But I was like, oh, but it at least gave you a picture of like this is what I'm working towards. Like, you need to be in those rooms where it's like you can get a picture at least of like, okay, this is what my next level looks like. So after that, I was just like, okay, you know. So those are the kinds of rooms that I've been able to be in. Even just film and TV stuff. I go to a lot of film and TV networking events. I was at one last night. For people, it was like a BC Toronto film industry meetup, and I went and got a chance to meet people. So those are some of the rooms that I try to be in.
Yeah, the BC film scene I didn't realize how big it was. It's pretty big
Yeah,
in
yeah,
Rocky.
yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. Even during TIFF, I went to the Golden Globe Awards party, and I'm a voter, so I got to go in, and I brought my wife. My wife had never been to an industry like event of that level, so I brought my wife, and we were just in there. It's like, oh, J Lo was sitting right there, and all these things.
Oprah was in the room.
Yeah, everybody's in the room. Like, I got in there, and Demi Moore's people were like, have you met Demi yet? I'm like, no. Like, okay, when she comes, we're gonna bring you over. And then she was there talking, and they like parted everybody. They're like, Demi, this is Kevin Bourne. You need to meet him. And I was just like, oh. I was like, this room is different. Like, it was just like, wow, I'm in the room with like the top of the top in Hollywood, and I'm like, I'm just this kid that grew up in North York on Keele Street, and I'm just here like. So those are the kinds of things I've been exposed to, and it's just like, man, like when I was leaving Ottawa, it's like there's a version of myself that I was seeing that was like I was seeing something of like, this is where I want to be, and then so the rooms I'm in now is like, oh, this is why I needed to leave a place like
Yeah.
Ottawa, not necessarily because a lot of people who leave Ottawa don't necessarily want to leave per se. It's just like, you know what, I kind of need to, I have to in order to kind of out
Out
of
of
necessity.
necessity. Yeah.
Yeah, so for me, it's like when I first had moved to Ottawa, like I was picturing being there for the rest of my life. I was such a big like Ottawa guy, like Ottawa, Ottawa. If anyone left, I'd be like, oh, why'd this person leave? And then, but then I got to the point where I was like, oh, now I see why people have to leave. And so now being in the rooms that I'm in, I'm like, these are the kinds of
Proximity matters. Yeah.
it does, right? And you want to be among the decision makers. I think that's where you want to be around in the place where you can like develop peer relationships, but you also want to be in rooms where the decision makers are, because those are the people that if you get access to those people, then that can change your life. So I'm trying to get more into rooms, where there are decision makers, but also where there's also peers that can like I'm trying to grow as a screenwriter, so getting in rooms with people that can be like, hey, let me take a look at your script and da 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 da. So life is kind of like when you get to like grade 8 and you're like, oh, I'm the king, and then you go to grade 9, you're like, oh shoot. Like, and then you get to like grade 12, you're like, I'm the king again. Then you get to university, you're like, oh shoot. Like you keep going through these moments of like, oh, I get to the top. And so for me, that was going to Ottawa. I was like, okay, I was like grade 9, I was in grade 12, like, yeah, I run the school. And then you go to university, you're like, oh shoot. So right now I'm kind of like, I'm at the bottom. I feel to a certain extent I'm learning again, and I'm just kind of working my way back up. And it's a nice humbling feeling, but it's also exciting because like every day you're learning something new. Every day you're meeting new people, and you're just meeting a new version of yourself every day. So it's exciting.
Yeah. When we were talking earlier about reinvention and evolving, the way you made it sound like is that everyone goes through these phases. And I think a lot of times, like when I'm in conversations with certain people, there's resistance towards change. And I think naturally it's unknown, it's unfamiliar. You feel like maybe you're not measuring what the cost of actually just staying here and staying the same is. And like when you talked about your earlier fear, I think that's my biggest fear is like you have to change in order to keep growing, and being in those situations where what you thought was your ceiling is now your floor, and you build back up again. But you're growing, like you're like 10 times better and like improved than the last person. But I do think it's a choice. Like you made it seem like it was just the default, this is how everybody moves, and I don't think that's the case. And so
That's true. That's actually true. That's actually true. Yeah.
and so what do you think it is about you that like jumps at change and jumps at being like the least influential person in the room? Like, is it just your love for learning, or what is it? Your ambition?
First of all, like, I've had my butt kicked by life. So I think I've hit rock bottom enough times and bounced back to know that it's a good thing. Like I've had, even like going to Ottawa, like again, Toronto, when I moved to Ottawa, it's like I had to start all over again. Like I had to start all over again at the bottom. Even moving back to Toronto, even though I was born and raised here, it's like I still had to, in a sense, restart again. I've restarted so many times and fallen and gotten back up. That's just like, I'm able to see the good in the bad. I'm able to see, even when money's low, Even when I have like, it's like, how are we paying for groceries? Like in all those moments, it's like I can look back and be like, man, that was good. Like that was actually good. So I just analyzing life. I think I'm just good at seeing the good in the bad, and I'm willing to be inconvenienced for a
For the
time.
long term.
Yeah, like I like my wife had a friend who these people were doing construction renovations on her apartment, and she was just so angry, like, oh, these people are tearing this up, people, and it's like they're just gonna be working on a place for like a few weeks, but for her she's like, they're tearing my, and my perspective and I think be like, man, I can't wait to get a new apartment, I can't wait to get a brand new whatever. Whereas for her, she's focusing on the inconvenience of the construction in her place, and it's like a lot of times we focus on that, like the momentary inconvenience, instead of saying, well, if I go through this, I'm going to have this pretty much a brand new apartment in a few weeks. So for me, it's like I'm willing to always go through the inconvenience in order to get the outcome. Like I don't even care what the inconvenience is. I have a faith in God as well. So I think that also helps me to recognize that I'm not alone when I do go through those moments. Like I feel that reassurance of like, okay, there's somebody greater than myself who's kind of with me through these transitions and these changes. So I think if I was literally going through it by myself, then I'd be like, oh my gosh. But just having that faith for me helps me to kind of go through these things and to see the brighter side instead of focusing on the inconvenience or what could go wrong. I'm probably gonna go through more of it. Like I mean, I don't know if Toronto's my final destination. I don't think it is, to be honest. I think there's another move or a few moves that'll
Yep.
happen over my lifetime. So I know there'll be another moment where I'll probably move somewhere else and I'll have to restart again, and it might be uncomfortable for a time, but it'll be good for me. So I think it's like
Yep.
I'm always looking for this moment of like, okay, when am I gonna be that guy that's just like stationary and I'm just here's my house and here's my whatever, and my life is just repetitive. I'm like I'm beginning to think that I will never have that, and I'm like I'm okay with that. I'm okay with my life always being another adventure. Like my mother-in-law said that to my wife and I. Was like, your life is always like there's always like a next adventure. When you guys are just gonna like, and I don't think I'm ever going to because I'm not interested in that. Like I always want to grow. I always want to like reach for the next thing. Why would I want to sit there and just be like normal and sedentary? And I have friends who are in their 30s and 40s are already talking about like just like, yeah, I'm gonna work for another 20 years and just get my pension and retire. I'm like, oh my gosh, like those conversations actually anger me. Like I actually get angry by those conversations. 'Cause I'm like, I'm not interested in that. Like I just want to, like I'm always going to be chasing the next adventure, the next growth, the next ceiling.
Yeah. When I was 20, I was hearing those conversations because I was the youngest person in my office. And this is when I was working for the public service in Ottawa. I would ask people like how long they were working there. And it was like a glaze went over their eyes and they like forgot that all this time had passed. And then I would meet other folks who were like counting down 5 years to retirement. And I just remember like I'm so grateful now, as you say this, that I had that rude awakening of like I do not want that to be my life like at all.
Yeah.
It was time to figure out my next move, by like making sure like I would work evenings and weekends in my consulting role and like finding different opportunities and building community and starting this podcast, moving to New York, whatever it was. But I just remember feeling like taking a backseat on your life is not an option at all, for
Definitely.
me at least. Yeah.
I remember there was one time my wife and I were leading a small group at our church, and everybody in the group, like they're all younger than us, like, newly married or engaged. Most of them had owned homes, had great jobs, and I was looking at their lives like, oh man, like that's the time I was like, I wanted some stability. I was like, oh man, like I wish I owned the house and had like the stable job and all that kind of stuff. And they were like, everyone in the group was like, we want what you have. They're like, you're living your dream. They're like we're not living our dream. It's like we have houses, we own home, we do all these stuff. And he's like, we have the picture perfect life. They're like, we're not happy. Like when I asked everybody like who here is happy, and no one put their hand up. And I was like, my wife and I were the only people that were happy, but we were the least stable people, and living this full time entrepreneur life. And they were like, living vicariously through everything that we were doing in our business. And I was just like, wow, like I'm here looking like these guys have made it, and they're looking at us like, nah, like you've made it. So I was just like a kind of a change in perspective of like, okay, like the grass always does look greener on the other side.
Two more questions, Kevin, for you before we wrap up. I'm curious to know, I think I know the answer, but what is the best investment that you've made into yourself, whether time investment, financial, and what have the results been for you?
Part of me wants to say it when I had a business coach, because that really helped me with my mindset. Like every month I was paying a lot of money to have a business coach, but the change that happened in me, like the stuff that she helped me work through, like I became a different person. And yeah, there's moments where I definitely saw the return financially in my business, where I saw things like change and whatnot. But that was definitely like, I had a coach for 4 years. I paid her a lot. That was the moment where I really recognized, like, man, like change is available for, like, growth is available to everybody, but most people aren't going to make the investments necessary to actually like get that change, or even just buying a book, even if it's just like
Yeah.
stuff like that. Like, I would go on business retreats too, pay thousands of dollars to go on business retreats, and it's just like, but every time I'd come back from them, it was just like, oh my gosh. So definitely that period of my life of having a business coach, going on business retreats, that was definitely big. But I'm like, but I also
When
feel
was
like
that? Out of curiosity, what stage of life?
that was maybe, I finished with her in 20, oh, maybe last year. Was it last year? I think I finished with her late last year, around this time, maybe last year. And it was 4 years before that. So was that 2019 to 2023? So yeah, that was that period. I definitely grew a lot. And again, I had some months where, like, because of that, like crazy financial returns that I saw. I think it's ongoing for me. Like I try to listening to podcasts or audiobooks all the time. Like I'm just really invested in my growth. Like I'm a high
Yeah.
growth individual. So for me, I'm always trying to, again, when I have people in my life that just aren't into like growing. And it's like, I've had to even like end friendships, or just like put friendship, not fully end friendships, but kind of put certain friendships on the back burner, because I'm growing so quickly and investing in my growth, and certain people aren't. And it's just like, okay, now the gap is starting to like, there's just a gap, and whatnot. But having a business coach, going on business retreats, are probably the best investment that I made. Is that what you thought I was gonna say?
I actually thought you were gonna say like, yeah, I mean relationships, investing in building relationships. I thought you
Okay.
would say.
Okay, no, no, that's definitely, there's certain relationships in my life that have, like, even now, like mentors. That's the thing with Ottawa, being in Ottawa, is that you don't have access, at least face to face, access to a lot of. I didn't have access to a lot of mentors, because there wasn't anybody who was doing the things that I was doing. And now being in Toronto, there's so many people I've met who are so much further along than me in media and film and television, that now have become mentors to me, and this is my first time really being mentored in the way that I'm being mentored right now. And it's just like, it's amazing, because I have mentors now that I'm like, hey, I'm trying to get access to so and so person, can you connect me? Oh yeah, boom. By the end, like, happened yesterday, there's a certain production company I was trying to get in contact with, and some other person was trying to connect me, and it was taking a long time, and I just hit up my mentor, hey, do you know so and so? Yep. And by the end of the day, we were connected, and I was like,
Perfect.
oh shoot, a door just opened. And it's like, just like that, and it would have taken me so long on my own to open that
Mm,
door. So investing in those mentor relationships, I've been doing that a lot over the past month. As I learned more about film and TV, I would just message people. Anytime I had a block where I'm like, oh, I need to, like, okay, I don't know how this works in film and TV. I see someone on LinkedIn
true.
who's doing it. Okay, boom.
Yep.
Can I get 30 minutes of your time? I ask them questions. Okay, boom. Now I got it. And then and I did that for like a straight month. And by the end of the month, I was like, okay, I understand this film and TV thing now. Like, I got it. So definitely that time of just investing in certain relationships and getting to know people and networking, all that, so valuable. So valuable.
Yeah. For the audience, there's a book called Who Not How that you should definitely read because it talks about what Kevin just mentioned. This is great, Kevin. Thank you. What's the best place for people to connect with you online and support your work?
So you can find me on all social media platforms at KB the Boss underscore. That's my old radio name. So yeah, at KB the Boss underscore on all social media platforms. Or you can hit me up at Shifter Magazine. I usually check those channels as well. But yeah, my own personal at KB the Boss underscore is usually the best place to reach me.
Amazing. Awesome. Thank you, Kevin, for making the time to be here on the Power of Why podcast. And to the audience, we will catch you in the next episode. Ciao.
Thank you for tuning in to another thought-provoking episode of the Power of Why podcast. For show notes and additional resources, Visit us at www.powerofwhy.co. And while you're here, subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or any other podcast platform to continue your journey towards understanding the power of your purpose and creativity.